Good evening. Good evening, directors, staff, and members of the public. I will now call this May 10th, 2022 regular business meeting to order. We will begin tonight by acknowledging that buildings within Minneapolis Public Schools are located within the traditional homelands of the Dakota people. Minnesota comes from the Dakota name for this region, Minnesota Makoche, translating to the land where the water reflects the skies, or cloudy waters. MPS recognizes the original peoples of this place and is committed to make ongoing efforts to educate the community about the relationship that Dakota people have to this region, both historically and today as they remain here in their home. Thank you. Due to a prior commitment, Superintendent Graff will not be in attendance at this evening's meeting, but we do have senior leaders available either in person or virtually, and Ryan will help me ensure that our questions are addressed by the appropriate staff person. Please also let the record reflect that as indicated in our meeting notice, Director Ali will be participating in this meeting via interactive technology pursuant to Minnesota Statute Section 13D.02. All votes taken tonight will be by roll call. Clerk Inns, will you please call the roll for the record?
Director Arneson?
Present.
Director Alamin?
Here.
Director Ali?
He's not here yet.
Director Sorillo?
Present.
Director Inns is here. Director Caprini?
Present.
Student Representative Rand? Student Representative Wesson? Chair Ellis?
Present. Thank you. We have a quorum. Next, we will approve our agenda for the rest of this evening. Director Jordan?
I'm here.
Oh.
Somebody didn't. All right. Sorry, Director Jordan.
Thank you, Director Jordan.
Director Jordan.
Madam Chair, I'm here.
Next, we'll approve the agenda for the rest of this evening. Director Arneson, will you please move approval of the agenda?
Madam Chair, I'm here.
Director Ali is here. You got that? Director Inns?
So moved.
No, Director Ali is here.
Oh.
Thank you. I've got a motion to move.
I apologize, Chair.
Thank you. Our agenda's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none? You okay?
Is this now? Oh, yes, I actually do.
Thank
I would
you.
like,
Director Caprini?
oh, thank you. I'd like to have the contract, the art contract, taken off the consent agenda and have a discussion about that.
It's been moved to remove the American Reading Company contract from the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. That motion's been approved, and the American Reading, is that company contract will be moved from the consent agenda and will be placed on the agenda after we approve the consent agenda. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the agenda as amended, please say aye. No, please take a roll call.
Director Arneson?
Aye.
Director Alamin?
Aye.
Director Ali?
Aye.
Director Sorillo?
Aye.
Director Inns is aye. Director Jordan?
Aye.
Director Caprini?
Aye.
And Chair Ellison?
Aye. Thank you. The motion carries, and the agenda as amended has been approved. Director Inns, can I please get a motion to approve the minutes before us?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. The minutes as presented for the March 29th and the April 12th meetings have been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion or are there any corrections? Seeing none, clerk, will you please call the roll on the motion to approve the minutes?
Arneson?
Aye.
Alamin?
Aye.
Ali?
Yes.
Sorillo?
Aye.
Inns? Here, yes. Jordan?
Yes.
Caprini?
Aye.
Ellison?
Yes, thank you. That motion carries and the minutes are approved. Next, we will hear from those who signed up to provide comment with us here tonight. As staff projects the speaker list and our first speaker comes to the podium, I'll remind us all of the public comment guidelines. Our goal here is to hear from those who have signed up in a fair way. To do this, we ask that each commenter begin by stating their name and relationship with Minneapolis Public Schools. Keep comments within the 2-minute limit, or 4 minutes if you have an interpreter, and we have a timer people can see from the podium to keep you on track. Do not mention identifiable information about individual staff or students, and do not use profanity, insults, or threats. If these guidelines cannot be followed, I will provide a warning, and then if time is needed, I will turn off the microphone and end your comment time. Finally, please remember that this is an opportunity for us to hear from you, and we will not be responding in the moment to comments or questions. Abdi Rashad Adal, please come to the microphone.
And I'm a parent with 3 kids that goes to Minneapolis Public Schools. I was here last year, maybe December, and I'm just gonna repeat what I said last year because nothing is being done. So I have 3 kids that goes to 3 different schools, to the same bell time, and you can imagine how hard that can be. Why? Because I have been retaliated against for complaining about my emails and phone calls were not replied or responded. Then I email Associate Superintendent Brian Zambrino, question is he didn't like it, and replied to me unprofessionally, defensive, and angry.
Excuse me, I need you to keep your comments general, so we don't name identifiable information. Don't name names, please. Go ahead.
And then I was told to not complain about Brian Zambrino if I want my kids to go to the same school. And don't complain to Director Martha Stewart to her managers. And then talk to Brian Zambrino nicely, and I assure you, you will get your kids to go to the same school. Where are we? The second one is, Director Ellison, I emailed you about some of the board members that have a conflict of interest.
Thank you.
And what did you do about it? And the Director Ali and Director El Amin have a conflict of interest.
Thank you.
What is the public going to do about it? Did they create all these issues to enrich themselves? Minneapolis is down 4,000 students.
Thank you. Thank you. We have other people. Thank you. We have other people who need to speak. Mr. Adal. Mr. Adal, we. Mr. Adal, thank you. Thank you.
Superintendent and the director of Ellison. Come and talk to me. I'll give you everything.
Faduma Ali. Is Faduma here? Julie Van Etten.
So I've been madly trying to condense things, so I'm going to talk fast. First of all, I just want to say that I'm a 31-year teacher in the district, an early childhood special ed teacher getting those really early learners in, and oftentimes the first introduction to school, and a proud member of the Sullivan STEAM team. And I just wanted to say that while we know that this global reform of schools and services is a really big ship to turn, that there are things that you can help us with right now, smaller things that would really impact teachers on a daily basis, make their teaching more effective and really affect the students. Because as impressive as everybody's resume is, nobody has taught this group of students, including us. And we know these students really well. We've worked for them really hard the last couple of years to make connections with them and their parents. And they're coming in, and this is really, really hard work. So one thing would be is in the statement, it says that what page should it go to? On the Minneapolis page, our promise is to offer inspirational education experience in a welcoming environment for all diverse learners. I would just say anything that you can do to let us teach. We have such creative teachers, but the more curriculums that come out every year, and then you tell us how to do it, it really makes an impact for the teachers who have so much robust to try and individualize for kids. So instead of telling us really what to do, please ask us what we need. We'll tell you, and we're good at it, and we'll do a good job.
Thank you. Amy Blumenshine?
Electrify buses. I'm Amy Blumenshine, and my kids, thanks to MPS, learned a lot and are now doing well, raising the next generation of students, my adorable grandchildren. While they're not yet old enough to attend school, my family and my neighbors continue to experience diesel fumes from multiple school buses and are concerned about the kids on those buses and their drivers and our climate. Tonight, I'm representing the volunteer MPS task force, part of the climate advocacy organization mn350.org, a member of the statewide Coalition for Clean Transportation. We're asking for your attention to changed opportunities for electric buses. We know you've been considering them and are committed to zeroing out emissions by 2040. But there are new programs and funding. It's constantly changing and confusing. We want to make sure that you know at least as much as we do. Accordingly, we're asking for a meeting with the Transportation Department to discuss the opportunities and barriers around the various funding and technical changes. Just days ago, the EPA finally revealed the guidelines for the $5 billion made available for low and zero emission school buses over the next 5 years. The application deadline for the first $500 million rebate lottery is in August, but an applicant has up to 2 years to complete the swap out of old buses. A school district like St. Paul could get up to 25 free electric buses and chargers as early as this year. If MPS doesn't act, our students and neighborhoods won't benefit. Diesel-related learning and behavior problems will continue, as will unacceptable asthma rates. Definitely equity issues. The Class 3 vehicles are also eligible. Again, we know you want cleaner buses. Let us help you access the best info. Thanks for your consideration of meeting with our team.
Thank you. Melanie Hanlon? Melanie? Gary Davison.
Gary Marvin Davison, New Salem Educational Initiative, just a few blocks from the Davis Center, teaching students who you academically abuse on a daily basis. Extended comments at newsalemeducation.blogspot.com. There is a tide in the affairs of humanity, which when taken at the flood leads on to fortune. Omitted, all the voyage of their lives is bound in shallows and in miseries. On such a full sea are we now afloat. We must take the current when it serves, or lose our venture. Greatest playwright, greatest writer in the English language, with the possible exception of August Wilson, with words that you need to consider at this moment. This is a hopeful moment in my 8-year investigation into the inner workings of the Minneapolis public schools. From your documents, it appears that you're on the throes of making a very favorable decision tonight with regard to the interim superintendent. We have a board election that everybody in this room needs to be aware of next November. And we have a real chance to add to the energy that my sisters, directors Cirillo and El-Amin, already bring to this board. We have stellar people. The majestic Ibrahim Ajap is finance senior officer. Karen DeVette, operations. Justin Hennis, information technology. Your problem, though, is that the academic division needs complete overhaul. Curriculum is actually implemented in pre-K through 5 is a disaster. You can't fool me on this. Kids come to me, they know nothing. Nothing. History, geography, economics. Go on to middle school, a little bit better. Get to high school, it's just the luck of the draw whether they can get an AP class and a teacher who's capable. Let's seize this opportunity. Let's take the Bard's advice and make a better way for the students of the Minneapolis public schools.
Thank you. Britt?
Hello, I am Dr. Britt Engrave. I'm a graduate of MPS. I am an MPS parent of a graduating senior and also of a 3rd grader. I'm in my 8th year as a school social worker at MPS, 5 years at Riverbend, and this is my 3rd year at Justice Page Middle School. I want to first acknowledge that I am part of an incredible multidisciplinary team at Justice Page. I'm here tonight to speak on the budgetary cuts specific to school social work positions. These cuts will greatly impact supporting student mental health in many schools across Minneapolis public schools. Our students have been forced to cope with the unimaginable these past several years. Students today are feeling increasingly hopeless, anxious, and depressed. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for 10 to 18-year-olds, and 72% of students experience at least one, often multiple traumatic events before the age of 18. School social workers play an integral role supporting students. The School Social Worker Association of America recommends a ratio of school social workers to students be 1 to 250. Up until now, MPS held a predictable staffing model of 1 to 750. With the budget reopening and new contract language, general predictable staffing for the majority of buildings has been eliminated. What is hidden in the allocation currently is that buildings are required to have 1.0 social work time, no matter the size of the student population. While this may be incredible for schools with a smaller population of students, this guideline leaves other schools floundering as cuts are made to these positions and in turn actually lower social work time that has been previously in place. For example, at Justice Page Middle School, we will have 1 FTE social work time for over 900 students next year. Due to the budget reopening, Justice Page is losing 0.4 social work time. This is my 22nd year as a social worker, and the acuity level in crises our youth are experiencing is the highest I've ever observed in my entire career working with children and teens. School social worker buildings are often the front, or school social workers in buildings are often the frontline response for students experiencing mental health crises and in need of ongoing support. In closing, moving forward, I urge and plead with you to consider how cuts to mental health positions in buildings impact students. I want to leave you just with a small note from a student. A student I work with gave me a card for Teacher Appreciation Week. She explained in the card how us meeting together has helped support her mental health. She closed with, "Thank you for helping me with my problems in life and making them better from listening to me." This right here is what it's all about. Student mental health matters.
Thank you. Robert Panning Miller, thank you.
Chair, directors, Robert Panning Miller. I'm a teacher at South High, 30 years in this district, and a parent. The symbolism that we have with the absence of Superintendent Graff is not lost on us. It's appropriate. He's apparently decided to phone it in. I think it needs to come back to the
Can you keep it more
point.
general? Thank you.
I'm sorry?
No identifiable information, just keep it more general.
Well, the point is that the superintendent and administration works for this board, right? You are in a position to direct the superintendent and the administration to take action. Right now, this district is in free fall. Whatever situation you are in, whether you're running for re-election or you're not, or you're stepping down, you have a responsibility to the students, to this community, to the schools. You can step up tonight and make a motion directing the superintendent to pull $27.1 million from ESSER funds, from reserve funds. There's a number of different places where $27 million are sitting. Make the motion, direct them to do it, and stop some of this chaos. Right now, schools are scrambling. We are losing staff. You are going to hear students and parents speak about the horrors that we're dealing with again. We can't afford to try to fix this in September or October. So pass a resolution, direct the superintendent to take action now. That's one thing you need to do tonight. The other thing that you can also do tonight by passing a resolution is to direct the superintendent and administration to set the last 2 weeks of school for distance learning. Right now, students, families, again, continue to scramble. We've got schools that are going to be overheating in those last 2 weeks, and instead I'm hearing that we're investing in fans and temporary air conditioning units. You have 2 resolutions. You can pass them both tonight. Please do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Dan. I teach at North High School. I like to tell a tale of 2 districts. In one story, we see our school communities disrupted and diminished by things like the CDD, the district redesign that moved students and programs around like so many widgets in a machine, driving even more families away from MPS. A story where the wishes of the majority of families and staff are often ignored by district administration and which is sold as democracy. In the other story, we see district staff, teachers, ESPs, transportation, food service, and clerical workers coming together to demand something more. A story of unity in the face of repeated disruption and disrespect. One where unions and community came together to demand a decent living wage for some of our most vulnerable staff. And what was the response from district admin to this long-sought unity and positive energy in MPS? Routine disregard for the negotiation process prolonging the strike, consequences of extra time added to our school day adversely affecting staff and families, and budget cuts further harming programs and communities that depend on them. These budget cuts are unnecessary as we know that the money is there. Particularly galling is the class size referendum money, which if untapped in this instance is likely to lead to the opposite of what it was levied for, an increase in class size. School board, as elected leaders, you have a choice between 2 districts. You can choose to use your power to build off the solidarity with our community that came out of the strike. You can use your power to tap unspent monies to avoid budget cuts and show you value the people doing the work. You have a responsibility to help students and families and educators who have suffered through a pandemic, riots, and political indifference. Or you can choose to continue the status quo of repeatedly ignoring the most important stakeholders, families and staff. You are making a choice we as educators and parents will be watching closely.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Ramel Cooper, and this is my first year working with Minneapolis School District. I work at the Hmong International Academy. I'm here to speak about the budget cuts within our school. The budget cut that happened in the first and second rounds of the budget tied out have left Hmong International Academy with a skeleton crew. We will be losing a grade level teacher in each grade, as well as all but 2 of our teachers' aides, despite student enrolled, projected to remain the same next year. The half-time specialist supposedly added to our school is coming out of their already tight budget. Nothing has been added financially. We will be losing other staff and support while it is required that we fill the specialists and school social worker positions. Our school will have one section of DDL and one section for the rest of the school, for the rest of the student enrolled in each grade, making our non-DDL section 3 times as big as our DDL section. Our school has already lost the only Hmong speaking English language teacher in the entire district in the first round of the budget cuts. We are losing just shy of $1 million in funds for our school. Part of that is because we went from a K-8 to a K-5 school due to the CDD and losing our status as a magnet school and shrinking our school zone to just a few blocks in any direction. Our student population has shrunk, but our students' needs are higher than ever, coming out of the trauma and disruption that has happened over the last few years and beyond. Yet in a year when our students have been in crisis, we are told to do more with less. Enough-sized students are worth more than the barest of minimum.
Please wrap up. Can you wrap up your
students.
comments? Can you wrap up now?
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
It is insulting to our students and families to continue to slash budget on the north side when there are millions available to the district. We're pleading with the district tonight to please listen to our cry and help us. I work in the DCD realm and I'm aware of most of the things that's happening. It's really affecting us. Please do the right thing and reinvest in our schools and the north side.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We also have a petition tonight that we'd like to present.
Okay. Do you want to just leave it up on
the table?
Yes. Thank you. Carlos Espinosa? Carlos? Mary Maynard? Mary? Okay. I'll keep calling names and I'll come back to her. Okay. Hey, Mary.
Hello. I always like to make an entrance. My name's Mary Manor. I'm in my 10th year of teaching English at South High School in South Minneapolis. It's the only place I've ever taught in Minneapolis or anywhere else. And in that time, we've experienced the coming and going of staff, students, I think at least 6 principals this year. One thing that has been constant through all of that is that we have music, dance, theater, a fully staffed library, 8 languages offered to our students every year. That's not just important to students and to staff, it's important to our community. It's important that our students and our staff can go out into the community and be proud of what we bring into our community through these excellent programs. These don't just engage students in doing art, playing music, dancing, speaking languages. We know that access to these subjects means students do better in core classes like English, math, and science. I know it's super popular right now to blame educators for the funding cuts. I mean, we went on strike for 3 weeks and we won some things that are helping our students with their mental, physical, and emotional health needs. You know, it might be popular to blame teachers, but it's popular to blame the poor for lack of money, the sick for their ill health, and the uneducated for their lack of opportunity. I think we need to do better than that. I think we need to look at the budget. We need to look at ourselves and the decisions that we've been making, and we need to make better decisions. I'll just close by quoting a student of mine who was at a school board meeting a few weeks ago and said, "This is absolute bull."
Thank you, Laura.
I don't know if I can top that.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you all tonight. My name is Laura Joshi, and I'm a parent of 2 MPS high school students. I'm here today to talk about one way to increase district revenue. I know we talk all about cuts, but one thing to increase revenue. As we all know, the budget situation at MPS right now is dire. The cuts to teachers, counselors, staff, administrators, and programs are many and painful. Inadequate funding from the state is certainly part of the problem, but the huge drop in enrollment since the CDD was approved is another major cause of the current budget shortfalls. We don't have direct control over state funding, but we do have control over student placement that impacts enrollment. It's time to stop the exodus of students from our district. It's time to start showing some flexibility around the rigid CDD boundaries. The CDD set artificially low enrollment caps at some schools that have space for many more students as well as demand. If there's open building capacity at a school and students are requesting that school, it makes no sense to deny them entry. It's far too easy for students to open enroll outside the district when we turn them away, and thousands have done just that. There are many reasons a student may request a school other than his or her assigned community school. Could be a location closer to home, siblings attending that school, specialized programs. Whatever the reasons, if we can keep a student in our district by accommodating those preferences, we should. It's good for the community and it makes good financial sense. So please do what is in your power now to keep students in our district and bring back ones who have left. Please accommodate student placement requests in school buildings that have the space available. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. I'm here to talk about your cuts to dance, band, and orchestra at South, specifically dance. But hello, I'm Logan Waugh, and I'm a senior at South High School, and I'm going to college for dance and creative writing. But where this decision began was in a small classroom on the second floor of South High. And I was a really shy kid. Getting me to raise my hand in middle school would have been a miracle, and my firm belief back then was that my body wasn't made to be anything great. And then I signed up for dance class 1 at South High on a whim. And quite simply, it made me understand that I was someone with potential, someone who was very strong, and someone who deserved to be loved. Arts at South had been hit hard enough when in my junior year we went from 7 to 6 hours, with most of the kids no longer being able to manage their challenging core classes and also artistic classes. This unfortunately also led our program to consist of mostly white and female identifying people, no longer as diverse as it once was when I joined in my freshman year. This school board continues to hurt my BIPOC peers with every move it makes. If you were to go through with this decision, you'd be ripping out the heart of South High. My dance teacher has stood by the dance program for 5 years, often doing more than what her job required, along with running half of the theater program, putting on 2 concerts, running 3 companies, teaching 2 classes, and spending all her free time writing grants and choreographing pieces for the kids. My teacher helps run Swing Night, which is one of the most anticipated school dances of the year, and the most accessible, with it being pay what you can and dress how you want. Something that has always stood for every dance show and has brought in all walks of life into our studio, including amazing artists of color that wouldn't be able to show if it wasn't for her. She would no longer be able to put on concerts because of halftime. Concerts are sometimes the only way students can get experience on stage or even get to see dance on stage. If you cut her classes in half, there will no longer be companies, no longer safe pockets of school where peers are your closest family. By cutting the dance position, you will be shoving kids into a small space, and kids can't get enough attention because classes will be at their caps. One-on-one is essential to a functioning classroom. This would almost limit our space for stretching across the floor and group work. Additionally, there'd be no levels for companies to differentiate the levels of dancer, something that adds discipline to the class. There will also be loss of multiple partnerships, including the Native Skywatchers, on a 3 to 5 year project that is fully grant funded. But most significantly, if you cut the dance position to 0.6, there will no longer be an option for kids who can't join traditional companies because of money, jobs, or home life. A cut to dance at South is a direct attack at students of color and the students at South living below the poverty line.
Logan, can you wrap up your comments?
Yes, I'm almost done.
Thank you.
There have been many times in my life where I didn't even have the heart to go to school, but I did because of the support I got from dance. The kind of support that just isn't possible if you cut the position to 0.6.
Thank you. Rashad.
Say good evening, school board members. My name is Rashad Turner, President and Executive Director for Minnesota Parent Union. Here to talk about the lack of transparency, but before I get to that, I've just been saddened to hear all of these comments tonight, most of them minus Logan and I believe Gary, who mentioned academic outcomes. Everything here tonight has been about adults and more money. And that's very telling because as you read articles about the financial situation of the district, this thing will be bankrupt in 3 years because we have way too many staff for the number of students that we have. So I think you all should do a better job at communicating that information so there's not as much of an information gap in our communities. What I'm here to talk about tonight, though, is the lack of transparency that we've seen as a community in the search for the superintendent, the interim selection, the school board member that will be selected tonight. So I'm here to encourage you all to be more transparent. You have partners in the community who are right now looking at you as partners. That can change to be critical friends. That can change to shutting down every board meeting because you're excluding parents. Another thing that I want to mention is that as an organization and as a community, we see you all as equals. And we expect that every board member, as well as student representatives, be treated as equals. We do not appreciate that certain directors sitting up here, to my right, that's as general I can get, have been excluded, have been treated like they are second-class citizens. They are directors who represent the community. Please respect them, treat them as equals, and treat this community as if you want us to be partners in these processes. Thank you.
Thank you. Darren?
So wellness is defined as the quality of state of being healthy in body and mind, especially as a result of deliberate effort. Good evening. My name is Darren Woodson, and I'm an Educational Equity Coordinator here at MPS. And I'm sharing this podium this evening with Dr. Emily Olson, who is also the Manager of Teacher and Development and QComp. We're here tonight to advocate to the board to make a deliberate effort to create a new policy aligned with financial compensation for the wellness of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, BIPOC employees at MPS. Deliberate effort to support the wellness of BIPOC employees of MPS is not new. Since the completion of the Human Resources Equity and Diversity Impact Assessment, the EDIA, in 2018, where it was found that BIPOC staff in MPS endured a work environment full of isolation, bias, racialized, and gendered aggression violence, you, the board, and MPS senior leadership established the necessity for affinity spaces, spaces for wellness, building connection, and for collective health to address these findings. You, now the board, have set the precedent for the necessity for wellness spaces and collective health, and those spaces need a new policy aligned with financial compensation for wellness. Currently, spaces for wellness and collective health receive compensation from policies that require labor to be done to receive funding. But wellness is not about labor. It is the time, now is the time to show that BIPOC employees that we are continuing to put deliberate effort into supporting their well-being and addressing the findings of the EDIA by creating a new financial policy that allows compensation for wellness absent of labor. But for this is for our well-being, and that deliberate need to support an effort is not about well-doing. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Kim Ambers? Kim? Bill English?
my turn. How some things change. Good afternoon. It's been a while since you've seen this old face here, but it has not been because I've been disinterested. It is more because I have become totally disappointed and rather disgusted with the behavior of this board, who continues now for more than 2.5 decades to fail our children. First, it was only black and brown children, and now you can't even get white kids to read. 40% of your white kids cannot read at grade level. There's something wrong when you cannot do that. Moreover, we are very much aware of the division in this board. While some members are kept out of it, a few act as policy brokers. That's unacceptable. When you cannot present a united front to your community, most of whom are black and brown, then something is wrong with you. Again, look at the makeup of this board. You don't represent the community. To be sure of that, I am co-chair of the Minnesota Parents Union. We believe in organized labor, but we believe that every parent in this room has the responsibility to be as organized and participate in the education of our children that this board has failed over and over again. We warned you. And now to select an interim superintendent whose history of failure is well known. I'm not attacking anyone. Look at the record of special education in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, and you don't see a record that you could be proud of. So I'm going to say this to you. You are challenged to recognize the Minnesota Parents Union as your co-partners so that we can bring a quality education to every child that goes to this district, including the white children who are now reading less than 60% are reading at grade level, 40% are not. That's wrong. You can fix that, but it means hiring capable and competent leadership. You've been unable to prove you can do that, and you will do this with this vote tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fatun Ali.
Fatun is not here.
Okay.
I'm Mustafa, but she's my colleague. Oh, sorry, I'm Mustafa. She's my colleague. She texted me. She's on her way, but she asked me to take the slide. So I'm Mustafa, Director of the Community Engagement and Enrollment for Minnesota Parity Union. Good to see you all. It's been for a while since I've been here. My calling for today is that heartbreaking data. I have it here. Before I say that, and like my colleague Rashad and everybody mentioned, it's really disappointing what we see here. But my direct call is the citizens of this beloved city who also fail their responsibility as community taxpayers and voters. All of you have a privilege to have to get up and vote. My fourth generation, my family, none of them have ever had opportunity to go up there and cast their vote. But I do. My dad never had a chance, I do. And we also fail our responsibility as a citizens. So take that to the account. We have a right, our kids get better education, but before this board, we are the problem because we create them. Right. We are the ones who pay them. If you don't want to vote, you don't have right to complain. Get up and vote and change the system. In November, that is where you lay your power. That's where you have a power. And second, we are being picked from each other. Everybody wants something, but still you have subgroups and their own self-interest. You cannot win if you have your own self-interest. Put the children and the families center for everything that we want to do, accomplish. Then we will achieve everything we need. Second, I'm sorry, I will make it quick, 30 seconds. I have the data here. Minneapolis is the third highest nation for families living in the Minneapolis public schools. I'll share with you. That is crazy. You know why? And we have 85% of the budget goes to the staffing. How, do you see where the problem is, guys? Can you, any one of you, pay attention? If you wanna, our kids, 4 out of 5 are not reading level.
Thank you.
So, conclusion, I will hold accountability on each one of us. Not only them. We know where they stand. But where you stand,
Mustafa, we've got other people who want to speak. Thank you.
I apologize. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Robert Walzer. Robert. Al Flowers.
Hey, good evening to the chair and the school board. You know, I had a lot. I was just coming here thinking about our kids and their education and how much they lost over the past couple of years. And I used and a big union supporter, but I tell y'all what we worrying about in our community. We worrying about 600 kids getting shot. We worrying about 85 of them being African Americans dead. You know, we were worrying about opportunity. So I keep seeing this fight that y'all may should take in the boardroom and get something done so we can get our kids educated. That's where I'm at with this. And I'm listening to everything being said because that's where I've been out on the ground. I'm usually at the school board. I was at the school board. Now I'm out there trying to save our people's life after a movement said, let's get rid of the police. And then a lot of criminals said, okay, we like that. We're gonna do some more shooting. We're gonna do some more carjackings. We're gonna do some more things. But it always impacts our community. It impacts my community. I'm in it. I'm in there on the street where we dying at. So my whole thought process changed when I got here, and I got to be nice. I can't even say nothing. I got my baby here. I got her here. Who go to Lindale, so I can't really say nothing. So you can look at me and stare at me, and I can't really do nothing about it because I'm not going to do that in front of my baby. What we thinking about is having a youth center about our kids, that they'll have a safe place to go because African-American kids don't have nowhere to go when they get out of school. So that's what I say to the union. Always been a supporter. But right now, it's something else going on here. It ain't about our kids no more. It ain't about our kids, it's the fight. It's the fight. And so even if it ain't, I'm saying it's about the it's about the fight. It's about our kids. It's about the kids losing we're losing our life.
Thank you, Al.
We're losing our life. So I tell you what, but this won't be the last word. Our community got to come out. Our community got to come out. The parents got to come out. They don't need nobody to speak for them. They got to come out. And leaders in Minneapolis.
Thank you, Al.
And we need to figure out a way to find out who's speaking for our kids. Because some of the people I don't even know. And if they teachers, they union, whatever they is, that's okay. But you need to have, y'all need to sit down and figure out how to educate our kids. That's what the deal is. So y'all keep doing this. But I promise you, I'll be back. I will be back, and I will talk to our community, and we will be back, and we got to get something done. I wish y'all, I've been in Minneapolis all the time, and some of this stuff I don't even know what they're doing.
Thank you, Al.
Just educating our kids. Excuse
Al,
me.
I've got other people who need to speak.
But I'm a little disappointed in the union.
Thank you.
But figure out how you can work with this district so you can educate our kids and quit all this fighting.
Thank you.
I need our kids educated. You ain't got to clap for me. And I'm telling you, I will be back for all of them.
Elia Pollard.
Y'all got money. Okay, I'm sorry. No, let me, hey. Boy, and I just want to.
No.
Okay, what's
Al, we've got other people.
Miss Riley. She just want to thank her bus driver from Lindale who always do something And then you want to say what you want to say. Say it. None? You too brass. That's okay. She wanted to thank her bus driver at Lindale School because she made sure that somebody there when I make a mistake.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Hi, my name is Aaliyah Pollard. I'm a senior at South High School who enjoys meeting new people. But sometimes I don't usually leave outside my comfort zone. Being in the dance and music programs have taught me to step outside my comfort zone, think outside the box. After hearing that due to budget cuts, that the dance and music programs will be cut, it was heartbreaking. Meaning students next year won't be able to enjoy and experience those classes like we do now. Whenever you hear budget cut, the first programs that cut is dance, then music. But we need those programs to shine, to really show our personalities. I've learned that I could be able to be myself and surround myself with a community who cares about each other and shares the same passion as me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Claire Connery, and I am a senior at South High School. The freshmen in the South High building this year are basically equivalent to 7th graders in how much in-person school they've attended. For those students, what they need is not only to be supported by teachers and staff, but by a community within those schools. During my time at South, the people that have been the most supportive, helpful, and made me feel safe within the building are students and teachers I have met in South's dance and music program. The first programs to get cut at schools are always the programs that give new students what they need. It's really scary to me that the sophomores and freshmen currently in the South building are not going to be able to access a bunch of the programs that made my time at South enjoyable and connected me with people that supported me when I was in trouble. For students, the money being cut is not simply money, but teachers that supported them when they needed them, programs they've invested time and effort into, and opportunities that are offered by those programs. Those programs also directly translate into opportunities to engage in the community outside the building, like band trips to Chicago or local artists from Minneapolis coming in to support the dance program. Those opportunities are pivotal to students who would lack access to them without school support, which is partially why students attend South in the first place, which is illustrated by the fact that during 8th grade presentation night, all of those programs were forefronted and then 2 days later were cut by the administration. This is partially why students attend South in the first place. Declining enrollment in public schools has one-to-one correlations with programs getting erased that they could get access to at suburban schools. I know a lot of people that picked South due to its music and dance programs, and without money, those programs will have a significant scale downs or shut down entirely. This is why I'm here to ask that the school board will increase funding for public schools. The millions of dollars cuts to schools would make a world of difference for returning students and students that are deciding whether or not they'd like to attend a public school in Minneapolis or a public school out in the suburbs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Stacy Gurian-Sherman. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I am a CCA, Child Care Assistant, and ESP at Armitage. I'm on the ESP board and the bargaining team. I also have a daughter who is a 5-year ESP and is a teacher, and I also teach a grant writing and fund development course through Community Ed. So I know something about grants, and I know something about staffing and students. And I'm here to tell you that if you make the wrong decisions about this budget, people who are wearing Union blue in this building and who are watching you are going to leave. And you are going to threaten the institutional knowledge that has built up over the years of people who have been dedicated to stay here. I want to go back and talk about your numbers and your words. Back in September 14th to be exact, there was a presentation made to this board of federal funds that came for COVID. $261 million. It's in your own PowerPoint presentation. On that day, the bulk of that PowerPoint was on ESSER 3 funds, $160 million. Of the 92 line items that were on 5 slides in that PowerPoint, one stands out as the largest and the least detailed. $74 million for staff and program continuity for the purpose of retaining and maintaining staff. Let me repeat that. Your words, maintaining and retaining staff. I know, as somebody who's been on all sides of grant writing, submitting proposals, writing RFPs, and overseeing them, you're lucky if you can spend down 80% of what you receive. Line items go back and forth. You have the opportunity to do a basic line item accounting of that $261 million, that $160 million in ESSER funds, and particularly that $74 million. On the back of my Union Blue, it says all in for students, families, and staff. Whether you are in for those folks is going to depend on you ratifying our contract, which is a blueprint for stopping the hemorrhaging of staff and students, and the decisions you make on this budget. It is not about punishing us about a strike. It is about cuts that hurt students. You cannot afford to have anybody in Union Blue walking out of this room and out of this district. Please make sure that you do that basic line item. You will find your $27.1 million in there. And I will say, we are not naive in the union. We realize COVID funds are not going to sustain these the costs.
You've got one other person to speak.
Thank you. I just want to say we are aware of that, but this district has been spending like somebody who is addicted to spending and has a lot of debt. You've got to change what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Scott Reed. Scott Reed. Okay, I'm going to go over the people that were not here when I called their name. Has Faduma come in? Melanie Hanlon. Carlos Espinoza. Kim Ambers. Scott Reed. Okay, thank you. I want to thank everybody who took time to share your feedback and perspective with us tonight. We will now take a 15-minute recess. Directors, we will reconvene at 6:45. So, thank you, everybody. Before we move to the rest of the agenda, I'd like to take a few minutes to acknowledge several upcoming recognitions and events within our community and recent achievements by our employees. This week is National Nurses Week, and tomorrow is National School Nurse Day. As our school nurses and health staff continue their work to keep our students healthy amidst the pandemic, please take time this week to acknowledge our nurses and health services staff for all they do for our schools. Thank you, nurses. Thank you. May is Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, a time to recognize contributions and achievements of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in our community. As part of this month's events, there will be a Hmong Heritage Night called Fostering Hmong Culture and History. It'll be held Wednesday, May 18th from 5:30 to 7:30 at Olson Middle School. Please consider attending and sharing with students, staff, and community. May also marks American Indian Month in Minneapolis. The Indian Education Department is hosting multiple events this month, including a youth honoring community celebration at South High School on Wednesday, May 18th from 5:30 to 7:30, an MPS graduating senior honoring banquet at Augsburg University on Wednesday, May 25th from 5:30 to 7:30, and Mademacaska Canoe of Nations event at Mademacaska on Friday, May 27th from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. And finally, there have been multiple accolades awarded to MPS staff recently, including Senior Officer Ibrahima Diop. He was named by the Council of Great City Schools the 2022 Bill Wise Award recipient, which honors senior school business officials who exemplify professionalism, commitment, integrity, and leadership. Congratulations, Senior Officer Diop. Director of Indian Education Jennifer Simon is Minnesota Indian Education Association's Administrator of the Year. Each year, MIEA presents awards to deserving individuals who are working hard and doing great things in Indian country. Congratulations, Jennifer. Just before Principal Appreciation Day, which was celebrated on May 2nd, we learned that City View Principal Renee Montague received the Minnesota Elementary School Principals Association Professional Leadership Award, which honors principals whose exemplary leadership and sustained efforts have made noteworthy contributions to the operation of effective school learning environments, to their profession, and to their communities. Congratulations, Principal Montague. I'd also like to recognize several outstanding MPS teachers who've recently received acknowledgement of their work right around Teacher Appreciation Week, which was celebrated across the district this week. 2 teachers were among those recently recognized as part of Education Minnesota's Teacher of the Year program. Edison teacher Aberdeen Rodriguez was a semifinalist, and Ann Watton teacher Edward Barlow was a finalist. Congratulations to Mr. Barlow, Ms. Rodriguez, and all those recognized. And finally, congratulations to the 2022 Teacher of the Year, Sarah Lancaster, of Onamia Elementary, who became the first teacher of Asian Pacific Islander descent to be named Minnesota Teacher of the Year. And finally, Mr. Ben Rengstorff, a ProStart instructor from Roosevelt High School in Minneapolis, has been honored as the top educator in the nation for the 2022 in ProStart Culinary Program. The prestigious James H. Maynard ProStart Teacher of the Year Award was announced last evening at awards gala at the National ProStart Invitational in Washington, D.C. This is where teams from Sauk Rapids Rice and Elk River High Schools represented Minnesota in the annual restaurant management and culinary competitions. Congratulations, Ben. Our next item is a presentation and the first reading of the 2022-2023 school year budget, which we will vote on at our June 14th meeting. I will now ask Senior Finance Officer Ibrahima Diop and his team to please go ahead with the presentation. After the presentation, directors will have time to ask questions.
Chair Ellison, members of the board, and public who's watching, following our meeting tonight. Thank you for having me. I made this presentation last week at the Finance Committee, and the material that is here will be complemented or finalized ahead of the meeting that we have as a Finance Committee meeting on the 17th of May. And so, as far as this presentation is concerned, I would start with the agenda as to what we would be covering today. We'll be going through the previous ESSA 3 funding, and ESSA stands for those who may not know what those letters mean, elementary, secondary, school emergency relief funds. So we had ESSA 1, ESSA 2, and here we're talking about ESSA 3. And so talking about previous ESSA 3 funding plan, we'll go through the current budget situation. We'll look at the steps taken to balance the budget. We'll update ESSA 3 funding plan to show you the update that were made to it. We'll look at ESSA 3 financial summary, capital plan adjustments, the link between our revenues and our capital plan by way of the debt policy that we have. And we'll the final piece would be the FY23 budget and the anticipated revenue and expenditures. And so there are attachments that are part of the what was uploaded in the board book. The department budget spreadsheet is there. The school budgets is there, department reduction, and my colleagues are here. At the Finance Committee all my colleagues were here and went through their respective departments and showed and talked about the reductions that they made and what impact that those reductions would have. So tonight they are here. If there are any questions pertaining to their department, their area, they stand ready to answer. And the other piece is the equity consideration process, because anytime that we go through the budget, especially when we have to make reductions, we make sure that we put equity on the table to making sure that anything that we do follows that equity guidelines that we have. The previous ESSA fund funding. We know that in terms of ESSA, we received $159.5 million that were allocated, including these bullet points here. Academic supports to address impacts of learning loss, $39 million. Safe and healthy schools for $19.2 million. IT, technology, $14.2. Highly qualified staff, $7.9. Mental health, $4.5. Continuity of services, $74.6. That's what we did, the allocation that we brought before you pertaining to ESSA 3. The current budget situation, when we did the first budget, the first iteration, we were done with that and sent the budgets out to schools on the 14th of February. And a week later on the 21st of February, we sent it to the departments. The department budget were sent to departments or department heads. And so there is also a additional 1,000 student decline that we recorded. And in honoring our valued employees with new contracts, that means that for the current year, we had to find $53.5 million. That's from April to June 30th. If we didn't do that, we would have had a budget deficit of $53.5 million. How are we meeting or closing that $53.5 million? We are using vacancies because we know that it's hard now to fill the positions that we have, and that is just not Minneapolis. It's all over the metro. It's all over the country. that positions are being very hard to fill now, and Minneapolis is not an exception. And therefore, we are taking $24 million that would be vacancy dollars. And we are also taking $29.5 million of Essa. And here you're seeing that we're not saying Essa 1 or Essa 2 or Essa 3. It's a combination of that we're using $29.5 million to close that 53.5 deficit. As far as next year is concerned, which is fiscal year 22-23, we did communicate by way of our pro forma late last fall that for the FY 22-23, we are projecting a $59.1 million gap. And that was well circulated, and actually we shared it in our survey with AMSD. Well, with the cost appreciations or increase that we've noticed, that we're seeing, we are adding a $27.1 million to that, which makes it $86.2 million as a projected gap for 22-23. And what we have on the table to close that gap would be threefold: using available ESSER dollars, use fund balance, and we're talking about assigned fund balance here, and budget reduction. I heard it earlier said that 85%, that is just not Minneapolis, that's any school district, major school district that you look at, 83, 84, 85% of the revenue is spent on salaries and fringes. That's who we are, that's what we do. It's not only Minneapolis, so it's all over. Steps taken to balance the budget. We looked at the budget, after we realized that now we have these costs to assume and close the gap that we have to close, because we have to bring a balanced budget before you. That meant we had to do things. We sent the budgets out, and they came back. The deadline for returning those budgets, both schools and departments, was April 29th, which is 2 weeks ago or so. And then we did say that we would be cutting 5% at the department level. So departments had to cut 5%. That 5% cut, whatever amount of money that yielded, would be sent back to schools so that we can reduce the impact of any budget cut on our students. We also did say that we would be cutting schools by 3%. Well, if we cut 5% from departments and then send that money, reallocate those monies to the schools, that means that the part of money that is going to schools has increased by 1%. So it's no longer a reduction of 3%, but an increase of 1%. Now, if you look at it at the individual school level, some schools may experience a reduction, some may not. But at the end, the total allocation to schools went up by 1%. And in the fourth bullet says school by school adjustment for projected enrollment of 1,000 students. The decline of 1,000 students is not a uniform phenomenon. Some schools may experience it in a more severe way than others. Those that experience it in a severe way would see a much more pronounced reduction. Reallocation of non-learning loss ESSER funds for continuity of services at schools and departments, accessing assigned fund balance, and equity considerations. And I mentioned that earlier. Anytime that we go through a budget development, we put equity consideration before us. Every department has to look at that and fill out the form, making sure that we are paying attention to equity and the impact of not doing that. Continuing ESSER 3 projects, the 20% set aside that for learning loss, that's a mandate, that's part of the federal requirements. So that is $31.9 million that we're still setting aside. To do what? Well, reading partners contracted services, math strategies, early literacy professional development, including letters, groves, and press, site-based reading teachers at every middle school, MTSS or multi-tiered systems of support or tiered intervention data warehouse, AmeriCorps tutors and graduation coaches in Office of Black Male Students, Indian Ed, and Check and Connect. Homeless and highly mobile summer program, access support, and literacy project. Another piece that we are continuing is the community partnership contracts. That is something that we feel needs to be continued, and right now it's well underway with the community at large, and that's for $2.5 million. And program and staff continuity for $125.1 million. So you can see that the majority of the Essa dollars that we have, we're using that to maintain staff, to making sure that we do not negatively affect our students. Some Essa projects now covered by other funding sources include ventilation improvements, technology, universal device, mental health support, professional development around climate, maintaining student stipends for youth anticipation and citywide student leadership board. One piece that I have to add here is our teacher licensure, because that was on the schedule to be reduced, but no, we're not reducing it. We're actually funding it, and it's $1.1 million, and I'll get to that in the next slide. Some SO3 projects are delayed or are no longer currently funded, and that include custodial recruitment and retention, emergency management services and supplies, and now, as I just said, the development of additional teacher licensure pathway programs that we're funding it, and it's $1.1 million. So that is going to come off of this list, and the projects that would be delayed or no longer funded, we continue with that with community outreach navigators and additional personal protective equipment, PPE. And as I said, the budgets were due back here on April 29th, and we are still working with a few principals, so the budget is a dynamic process right now, so it is subject to change, but by the time we get to the May 17th Finance Committee, it should be final or very close to that. How the $159.5 million in total Essa funds is allocated. $19.7 million for the current year, $31.9 for learning loss, and that's been set aside, and it's a requirement, federal requirement. $2.5 million for community contracting, and I mentioned it earlier, that is well underway. $59 million for continuity of services for fiscal year 22-23, and $56.4 million for continuity of services in 23-24. And with that, there is $0 remaining in terms of Essa. Capital plan adjustments. Due to enrollment losses, MPS is projecting decreased revenue in future years. I just mentioned the 1,000 student decline that we recorded. And so as we see declining enrollment, that would mean declining revenue. And our policy 3290, which is our debt policy, has two conditions: that we pay 70% of our debt in 10 years, 70% of the debt in 10 years, and that not exceed 15% of our general revenue for debt service. Right now, we are very close to that 15. And as revenue goes down, then we would be bumping against that ceiling. That's why we have to do some reduction in our capital plan. And my colleague, Karen DeVette, presented before the Committee of the Whole a few weeks ago and mentioned that there are, disruption in the supply chain, and there are conditions that just make it very difficult, if not impossible, to actually do the work in terms of capital work. That is on the operation side. On the finance and fiscal side, we're looking at a debt limit that is coming down, and as it comes down, and our revenue is going down, we cannot increase our projects, because when we do, we would be then over 15%, which would be against the policy that the board has. When it comes to anticipated revenue and expenses, this table, the bottom line, the bottom thing shows $943 million, $943,813,379 in terms of expenses against a revenue amount of $846,688,041. The main line here would be the top line where you see general operating fund. Expenses, we're projecting to spend $519,559,148. In terms of revenue, we are expecting to receive $491,176,294. That's the difference of about $28.3 million. And if you look at the other funds, like grants is constant. Food service, we see a decline of 1.7 million. Community service fund, we see a decline of 1.2 million. And so you can see there that our expenses are much higher than our revenue. And with that, we'll need to do reduction in expenses, because the two things that you have when it comes to school budgets would be the revenue budget and the expense budget. You can reduce expenditures, that's an option that we have, or increase revenue. We have less flexibility when it comes to that, but it is still an option. As far as next steps are concerned, we do have a finance committee on the 17th of May, and we plan on bringing the resolution, the budget resolution, before the committee at that time. And we have the board meeting on June 14th, and that's usually the second and last reading of the budget. So that's what I have, and if there are any questions, I'll answer them. And so thank you very much, Chair Ellison and members of the board.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Directors, if you have any questions, please hit your request to speak button. Director Inns.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Chief Job. On question, or on slide 9, the financial summary, those last two line items, the $59 million for continuity of services for 2022-23, and then 56.4 23-24. Is that, I'm pretty sure that represents like staff salaries for the most part. Is it keeping staff, funding staff? Is that what most of that, the bulk of that is?
The bulk of it is staff salary, both at central office and at schools,
okay.
district-wide.
Just a rough idea. Is it whatever the percent is for schools, it's roughly the same as it is in the budget, presumably? So if we have, let's just say, I mean, what percentage of the staff in schools, of staff salaries is staff in schools, and what is central office?
I don't have that percentage. What I have for certainty is that in terms of percentage, the majority of these set-asides would be going to schools, not central office.
Okay. And then what happens in 24-25?
First of all, most of these we're using SO3 to do that, and SO3 is due to sunset by September 30th, 2024. So that means that if we're talking about years beyond 2024, we would have to make budget cuts to close the gap, because we would not have SO3 to pull from.
Okay. Is some of this stuff in the is it accounted for in the contracts, in the salaries, in the budget basically already?
I guess I don't understand your question.
Well, you know, when we were settling the strike, and we were talking about how we're going to budget for increased salaries or increased employee costs, right? We talked about, a lot of people talked about the ESSER funds as a part of that, right? Mm-hmm. And is that what this represents kind of a little bit, or no?
No, when we were talking about salaries, we did say at the beginning that there is a limit, there is an amount that the district cannot afford, because we're looking about, when you're doing expense, you look at the rate of growth of your revenue. Uh-huh. And if you do have a rate of growth of 1% or 2%, and the salary wage is, the weight is higher than that by maybe 2 or 3, uh-huh. Well, that means that right now we can use Essa 3 funds to do that, but absent Essa 3 funds, we wouldn't have any money to pull from. The 27.1 million is a yearly increase in our budget.
So this time 2 years from now, right, not me, but other people are going to be doing the budget, you're going to have to figure out how this is going to happen.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Arneson?
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks for being here. And congratulations on your
Thank you.
award. We talked about some of these things at our finance meeting, but I think some of them are worth kind of repeating. The first thing I'd like to talk a little bit about is you're mentioning that we are closing the budget gap this year. We're balancing the budget accessing assigned fund balance. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about kind of the definition of what qualifies in assigned, like what categories are included in assigned fund balance, and what kind of funds we're accessing, I guess, as it relates to the budget, as it relates to balancing the budget.
Well, thank you, Director Arneson. The assigned fund balance would be, as the title suggests, items that are assigned that we have in fund balance, and sometimes we would have in assigned fund balance, for instance, QCamp, that is earmarked for QCamp, and we put it in assigned fund balance. And there may be some vacancies that came from some referendum, for instance, that would be in fund balance because they are for specific use. Aside from assigned fund balance, then we have unassigned fund balance. And in terms of unassigned fund balance, the 55 million that I've seen or heard that we can go and pull from, yes, that is an option. We can do that, but there are consequences that would come after that. With that, we do have a fund balance policy, that is a board policy that says that we have to keep anywhere between 8% and 13% of last year's expenditures as a reserve. And what happens if you go, and right now we are barely at 8% after 2, 3, 4 years of hard work with everybody in the district played a role in that to get us to where we are, which is 8.4 or 8.2, 8.4%, I believe. If we pull money from unassigned fund balance to do anything other than what that is set aside to do, we would inevitably be downgraded. If you look at our bond rating, we have it at AAA with S&P Standard & Poor's, and we do have it at AA1 with Moody's. The key thing here is the outlook. We've had a negative outlook for many years. For about 3 years, that has been upgraded from negative to stable. And if you've been following the fiscal news over the past week and a half, the Federal Reserve has raised its rates by 50 basis points. And one of the governor was interviewed today and said that it is not ruled out that by between June and July, they would add a 75 basis point increase. What does that mean? That means that interest rates are going up, and there is an inverse relationship between interest rates and prices of bonds. Well, we're scheduled to sell bonds in November, December. When we go to sell them in an environment of rising interest rate, that means that there will be pressure put on our bonds. And if you have that and a downgrade on our outlook, then we may be, and we've been selling bonds at a premium every time we went on the market to sell bonds over the past, since I've been here. What that means is that if we need 100 million, we sell 90 million, and the 10 million would be covered by the premium that we would be commanding because of our rating. If we don't have that rating, then chances that we would be selling at a discount. What that means is that if we go to sell and we need 100 million, we would sell about 102, 105 to net that 100 million that we would need, which would be a pressure on our debt burden. So my point there is that unassigned fund balance. It took us a long time to get to that, and it is for really, if there is a government shutdown, then we have to continue as a large operation. That's what we are. We have to continue paying our teachers, our administrators, everyone who works for the district. With the government shutdown, we would be pulling money from that account. That's what that unassigned fund balance is. If there is a, God forbid, a fire at a school and we have to rebuild it right away, that's where we would go to do that. So my point is that the 55 million that is in an assigned fund balance is there for a reason, and it's making the district stable. So to respond to your question, Director Arneson, it's good to have a healthy balance on either assigned or unassigned, knowing that in this case, the efforts that we're making to close the gap, when we say fund balance, we are referring to the assigned portion of it. And at first we said that we were going to take 21 million from that. Now the 21 million would be more than that, and we'll bring that to the Finance Committee on the 17th of May.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm hearing you say is a couple of examples that where assigned fund balance might be showing up in this budget would be maybe Q-Comp, that assigned fund balance, perhaps the referendum assigned fund balance. I think another example, whether it's in the budget or not, I don't know, but nutrition, I think community education are some other examples of assigned designated fund balances. And to what I'm also hearing you say, to your point, we have an unassigned fund balance policy of 8 to 3%, which the board set. That's our thing. That's our prerogative.
And our textbook K-5 math adoption, the budget that we were planning to use, that we are planning to use to meet that that target, is actually in assigned fund balance.
Oh yeah. Okay. Great. All right. And so that I also what you didn't mention, I think, but we've talked about in finance is also our cash flow. Ebbs and flows because the revenue from the state varies. And so I know the last 2 months or 3 months or so at finance, actually our fund balance is closer to 4%, 4 to 5%, because the revenue has dipped down because we're kind of waiting for some cash to come in. And so that kind of, it gives us some cushion to handle kind of varying cash flow. And what I'm also hearing you say, which you explained nicely, is that you mentioned that some capital projects we're needing to reduce the scope of our capital projects because we pay for those capital projects by cashing out our bonds, which is kind of like a loan. And so we risk, if we spend more on our we're already reducing the amount of capital projects we can do, like air conditioning or others, right? Because we have this, we can't spend more than 15% of our general fund towards paying off those loans. So the more we dip down into fund balance, the riskier or the more challenging it will be to do capital projects or to maintain our buildings, is what I'm hearing you say as well.
Yes, and I think the piece that is very important is what you just mentioned. In some states, schools would get their state aid, 1/12 of it every month. And so with that, you get enough cash flow to actually meet your payroll obligations. In Minnesota, we may get 20 million in August, and may go August, September with minimum payments, maybe $1 million here or sometime no payments. At the same time, we are still having to pay salaries and fringes, and we do that by pulling from unassigned fund balance, and when that revenue comes back, we put it back into, we pay back unassigned fund balance.
Right, and I think if our fund balance is at 8%, that's about 8 weeks of revenue.
Yes.
Correct? For
8 weeks
payrolls.
of operations.
For example, the state didn't reach a budget, right, and it was shut down for a period of time, or our cash flow stopped entirely, we would be solvent for about 8 weeks. Yes. Is that about right?
That is right.
Okay, thank you. All right, and then I just want to say, even though if you can indulge me for a minute, those who follow finance know that I never miss an opportunity to talk about the chronic underfunding of education. So I need to say that here, that we're in the unfortunate position of not being entirely in charge of our revenue. So we have the option to raise revenue through property taxes, which we've done, and we've maxed out, in fact, so we can't do that more. But that system is fundamentally inequitable, and it's a regressive tax. So then the bulk of our funding is coming from the state, which has not kept up with inflation for decades. And so just this is a good opportunity to highlight that. Just yesterday, our board joined others across the state to highlight that schools are only reimbursed for about 15% of the cost of special education services. And every school district in Minnesota is facing this problem. And we were at the Capitol yesterday asking for assistance. So this is the time to be asking. So it means that we're struggling to provide important and necessary services to our students, not just in MPS, but everywhere in our state. And it puts us in this place of making choices that are beyond difficult, but rather it's really an education crisis right now. So I think it's really important to be clear about that, because in addition, we can talk about the line item and we can do that, but fundamentally education is underfunded, and this will be a challenge until, and we need everyone's help in elevating this budget conversation beyond this room.
That's an oversimplification.
Student Representative France.
Hi, I just have.
Please stop interrupting our student. Thank you.
I'll talk if I want.
I have a question about previous ESSER 3 funding plan on page 3. And my question is about the category highly qualified staff. I just wanted to know what that category covers, or would have covered, past tense.
Student Representative Rance, I'll have my colleague in HR answer that highly qualified staff. I know what highly qualified staff in finance would mean, but I think this is more about our teachers and paraprofessionals than it is finance. Kendra, would you answer that for me?
Repeating the question, please. For page 3, for the category highly qualified staff, what does that category cover?
So highly qualified staff would mean staff in any category that meets or exceeds the minimum qualifications. So our goal in HR through recruitment, our recruitment efforts, is to attract and retain the highest quality employees for students in Minneapolis.
So the funding would include job searches? Does that also?
Recruitment and retention efforts.
So would that include trainings?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Ellison. Thank you, Senior Officer Giap. My first comment is I'm happy to see that we were able to find some funding for the pathway programs. That's incredibly important to myself, I'm sure everyone here. And the other, I guess, question would be the fund balance. If we had to use those dollars, basically that would be anywhere from a 6 weeks to the operation. Like, how many weeks of operation does that cover? Is it 6 to 8 weeks?
8 weeks.
6 to 8 weeks. Okay, that's not a lot. So I just wanted to make sure that that was also clear, that we, I think we need we're going to need some kind of cushion to literally fall back on over the next 2-3 years. We're going to need to have some of those supports in place. And again, I want to echo what Director Arneson said about the underfunding of public education. I'm really pleased that it's something that has spread throughout the state. There's a better understanding of the lack of funding for special education and English language learner funding. So I am extremely excited that folks were at the Capitol yesterday speaking to it, and I understand that at 1 o'clock tomorrow there will be a conversation surrounding special education and English language learner funding. So I hope any of you can go to the Capitol. I do believe there will also be an opportunity to see that online. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Caprini.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chief, for the information. So I'm kind of going to go back to my question that I asked the other night when we had our finance meeting, because I don't think it quite got answered around the academic piece. And my concern, I mean, I know we're on slippery slope right here now within MPS and trying to balance with the loss of students in our schools. And I find ourselves having to have these tough conversations sooner than later with our community, because again, I had the opportunity to be over at Hall just yesterday, and I'm talking with some of the staff, and a few of those key staff members that are going to be cut from the budget, which is our Black and brown educators, right? Those people that are building the relationships, that are making a difference alongside of the teachers with our families. So I look at the program and staff continuity, the 125.1 million, and I guess I'm just trying to understand how are we going to take a look at that and align it with some of the positions that are being removed, some of the programs that are being removed. Some of the students even talked tonight about how some of their dance classes and stuff are going to be removed. But here, we as a board have tried to allocate dollars to create that stability, right? So help me to understand that a little better, if you can.
Director Elamin, thank you for the question. My answer is, I'm a finance guy. I would say to you that when we say continuous services, at first when we said it was to making sure that we in a midst of a pandemic and social unrests, we were having during that time declining enrollment. And if we were to say, well, we lost 1,500 students, therefore we would have to reduce accordingly, it would be that we would make reductions at schools, and it would be affecting students, and some in central office, and staff here at the Davis Center and other areas of the district. And it was decided to not further shake the system and keep then the individuals or the staff members that would have been reduced, keep everyone, and then use ESSA2 first dollars and then ESSA3 dollars to maintain staff throughout this time. When it comes to a reduction at the school, I mentioned it earlier, if a school records a declining enrollment, let's say of 200 students, that's 200 times about $6,800. That's what the student generates. That's a sizable amount of money that if a school is to balance that budget, then it would be hard. But it would have been even harder if we were to actually, if we did reduce staff at that school. So right now schools have their staff. Most of these ESSA3 dollars are covering staff members at schools. And if there were no ESSA dollars, then that means that we would have reduced. And on top of that, the impact of the 1,000 student decline would have been felt. That's in terms of monies, why we did that. When it comes to now academics, I would leave that to the academic team to provide the answer that would be actually, I think, what you're asking, which is what is the academic impact, or how do we avoid that academic impact on our students? So I would have, Dr. Fearing is not here, but Maria Rollinger, can you answer that?
Hello.
Good evening, Chair Allison, directors, and student representative of the board. I think in any time that you have reductions that need to be made, it is a difficult decision. It is not. If you talk to any of the building leaders, if you talk to any of the leadership teams at the building, it is a hard decision to make, especially at some of our schools where the reductions that they had to make, especially the second round, were significant due to enrollment projections. I think at the central office, we try to provide as much support to our sites as possible. But again, in the academic department, we did make some significant reductions. And because a lot of our department, we support staffing and programs that go out to schools. When there are reductions in our department, it is impacting schools at the sites. So you asked that question, Director Elamine, about how do we try to mitigate, or how do we try to maintain some of the programs that are of value to our students, like we heard from the students tonight. There is no easy answer for that. I think as a district and as a system, that is what we are trying to work through right now.
Okay. Thank you for that response. And again, I recognize that it's very challenging for us, but I also think that we, again, as a board, and myself personally, we need to just look at a lot of the different programs that we are doing and see what's good or what's working and what's not. I think there's quite a few areas that we could take a harder look at and just try to make better decisions and implement and make it balance out to create that stability and that equity that we as a board stand behind and wanting to give to our families. So thank you.
Director Jordan.
Thank you, Chair Ellison. I just had a quick question. On the slide that says the original allocation of ESSER 3 funds, it said $4.5 million for mental health supports. Mm-hmm. And then you go down a couple slides, I don't know the number offhand, but it says updated ESSER 3 funding. It says some ESSER 3 projects now covered by other funding sources, including mental health supports. They're now covered by other funding sources. Is it still covered at $4.5 million?
Yes, it is, and thank you, Director Jordan. And that covered by other funds means that now the academic department has to go further in their budget and find that fund to meet that obligation.
Okay, good. And the other one is more of a general comment. In terms of like our updated school budgets, we've heard from people tonight, social workers, and I know of several schools where they've had to cut a counselor, which runs counterintuitive to what we have discussed as boosting supports for our students, mental health supports, counseling, and we're actually going in the complete opposite direction. And I know that's not in your purview, but I'm just making the general summary, which I think is completely wrong, that we are going in the complete opposite direction in terms of providing support for our students. Last fall I spoke that we were talking about our strategic plan. I was like, we need to increase our mental health support services for our students. We need to provide more counseling services, more access for our students. Excuse me, getting over. But it just seems that we're, and that's, I'm not going to point fingers at anybody, but there has to be a better way or a better path to solve this. But I'm not, excuse me, but I am not going to support any school budget that removes counselor or social workers from our school or even cut their time. I just think that it is inherently wrong, and I just spoke to this, I believe it was last October's strategic plan meeting. And so I'm not about to do a 180 and vote the other way. And so I won't be voting for this next month. I just refuse to be party to that. So I just thought people should know that now. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Soria?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Good to have you here. How many students have we lost so far? Do we have that data? I know it's probably something, I don't know if you have that information. Does anybody have that information in the district leadership present?
Director Ferrello, we do track students on a regular basis. We do have that information, but what we have is the 1,000 student that is in the presentation. And when we get an updated number, then we can communicate that to you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And on slide number 5, steps taken to balance the budget, something very challenging. So the estimated 1% increase in budgets for schools. Mm-hmm. So is that, I'm just a little bit confused. So we are facing these budget cuts, but schools are getting a 1% increase? Can you clarify that just a little bit more, please?
Yes, thank you, Director Cirillo. I started by saying that the plan was originally to cut 3% from school budgets. And on the one hand, you're cutting 3% on a school budget. On the other, you're actually adding money to schools. One example is the 5% that were cut from departments. That money flowed to schools. And there are few other things that came up. One thing that I remembered was a 5.6 million. This was about a week and a half ago that we had to fund. And it is for, I think, SEA, but I'll let the academic division, they may know more. But it was a new charge that came that we had to meet, which is 5.6 million, that is going to schools, not departments. So if you do the sigma or the total of all those monies that are now allocated back to schools, you'll get a 3% here, and then a increase here. And the difference between what we cut and what we added is a positive 1%. Which means that we sent 1% to increase to schools in general.
And what were the district budget proposals to cut staff in the Davis Center? Do we have that? I'm not part of the finance team, I'm sorry, or committee rather. So I'm just, I do apologize, but I was just wondering. And I know we are still, in the process of putting this together.
Yes.
So, but I wanted to know also, what's the process of the guidance that you do receive? Like, for example, if we have so many positions that could be, cut from the Davis Center versus, cutting that to the school budgets.
We have in the appendix right now the reduction at a school, at a department level, what every department reduced by. And we can, the finance department itself has about 3 positions that are vacant right now that we could be filling, but we will not be filling them so that we can meet the 5%. One of them is in payroll. And we do have a district, a large district, and if you look at our payroll, and this is just for finance, payroll team, it's a team of 4, including the manager. So that is definitely not adequate. But we are cutting just to making sure that we close this gap. That's what I can say in finance. What is the impact of that 5% in finance? And to answer your question, last finance committee, my colleagues came and talked about their 5%. And this time we didn't do that, but we included the information in the packet that shows what every department is reducing. And when we say cut at the Davis sometimes, it may mean different things to different people, because cutting at Davis there is maybe 45 or 50 million that is at Davis, but it is for transportation. If we cut that, that means that it would impact kids' transportation. Cutting at Davis may mean let's go and cut the budget at HR. At a time like this, I would think that HR should be staffed to actually meet the pressure that we would be facing. And so cutting at the Davis is easier said than done. I can give you an example here. 2-3 years ago, that was what was said, that was asked to do, and we did that. In one day, we had to find, on a Friday, I would never forget this, had to find 6.4 million in one day. What that meant was that we went and cut deeply at the Davis Center. Few weeks, months later, what did we realize? That there were forms or reports that were supposed to be sent to the state that were either late or just never sent, because the person that was the staff member that was supposed to do that was reduced, was cut. As a, I worked for a previous district before, and in finance, where I am looking at 4 people in 4 staff members in payroll, which is an important department. All right, 4 people. In my previous district, we had 8. And so every year we get one finding in the audit report, that is separation of duties in finance, in the district, right? And that is because we don't have enough people to do certain tasks, to a point where one person would do too many tasks than they should, which would cross the line of separation, internal controls. And once we get to an optimal level in finance, for instance, we could erase that, but we're not there yet. And so cutting at Davis, again, we can cut at Davis, but the impact of that has to be understood. And we're cutting 5% right now that we're sending back to schools. I can see what that impact has or is at the Davis Center. And at the end of the day, it's going to schools. And as I said, that's to reduce the impact of the budget cuts on our students. Thank you.
Does that help? Do you want to hear from all the departments? Do you want to hear from all the departments of the Davis Center? What was this? Good.
Teaching and learning.
This was good?
Associate Superintendent.
Thank you. Director Ali.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd just like to make a comment, and I want to thank his senior officer Diop for this presentation. My comment is very short. We are still in the middle of the uncertainty due to pandemic and social unrest. It's very important that we must maintain our fund balance around 8%, as we cannot predict what may come. And it's very important that we have to be financially responsible and must be willing to pay our staff in case of continuation of uncertainty or any other emergency situations may arise. Having said that, it's also very important that we have to, and we must, make it mental health support as our first priority. As you all aware, mental health is real, and you have listened enough comments tonight, people who have been our frontline staff who are advocating for more mental health support. And I am urging my fellow board members and the superintendent to make sure, despite all these changes taking place, our mental health of our students and staff must be our first priority. Lastly, as you all aware, our state has over 9 billion surplus. And I think it's very important for all of us to collectively, as citizens of city of Minneapolis, to collectively advocate for more funding for our public education. It seems now state is not doing enough. And we have to demand collectively as teachers, board members, administrators, and the community members at large. It's about the time to say our state must put our education, public education, first priority. So thank you very much for listening. And I look forward to supporting any increase for mental health support for our students and staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Ali. Director Inns?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to revisit just for a second, follow up a little bit on Director Cerrillo's questions. The steps taken to balance the budget and the two line items, 5% reduction in budgets for departments and estimated 1% increase in budgets for schools. So presumably, and you gave us the narrative that originally there was estimated that we'd have 3% cuts at schools. And this 1% doesn't necessarily mean the exact same thing, right? And but when I hear that, when I hear like 1% increase in budgets for schools, and then I hear cuts from counselors, for instance, right? Or music or whatever it is, the things that we're cutting, I wonder how that can be. And I guess what I think, and you tell me if this is right or not, but any budget cut to a school then has got to be related to the enrollment at that school, because presumably all things being equal, the same programs or some kind of program adjustment change in a priority that, you know, a decision might be made by the building leadership or district staff about the direction of that school, right? So if somebody's being cut, then they're being replaced with something else if there's a 1% increase. So if we're hearing that a counselor is being cut, for instance, at a school, and there's no enrollment decline at that school, it would have to be replaced with something else, correct?
I agree with you, but if we're saying a reduction at the school, it's primarily due to declining enrollment that is more pronounced at that school.
Mm-hmm.
So pronounced that the amount of funds that are now coming into the school are not enough to cover for that declining enrollment.
Yeah, and I'm not like, I don't want to get into the individual budget at a school right here, right now. We're not going to discuss that and figure out why it is, right? But that's the reasons why these decisions would be made.
Yes.
Okay.
That's and that 3% went down to 0.6% for about 2 weeks up until last week or so. When we realized that we needed to pay for a mandate that schools, we put on schools, and we needed therefore to accompany that with the funding that they would need. And that cumulative amount would be 5.6 million. And if you put 5.6 million back to schools, if they were at a 0.6% decline, that flow of money or cash flow inflow for schools would erase that 0.6 deficit and bring it into a positive one.
Okay. So, like, I mean, just, you know, I have my own values, right? I have the things that I think are important in our schools. You know, we as a board have our things that we put forward that we think are important. Those manifest differently at different schools, I think. Like, I just thinking about, I'm in a meeting today at my school where I work, staff meeting, and I'm like, why are we, you know, this seems like a dumb idea. Why are we doing this? This seems like a way. But if I were to make the budget and get rid of that, it still does represent somebody's job, and something would presumably replace it then, right? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah. I think I'm going to ask academics to help us out here, because we're asking a lot about mental health supports in the budget and maybe predictable staffing in the budget. So maybe if Deputy Senior Academic Officer Rollinger could help us out. I'll repeat that: the mental health supports and predictable staffing. Okay.
Hello? Okay. I know Dr. Fearing said that she would like to also address the school board as well. She's going to be joining us virtually. I did want to just say regarding mental health support services, We were able to mitigate through the academic department to be able to maintain the current status of the mental health services that we are providing to our students and at sites. With again, the additional budget reductions, we were unable to expand as originally planned, but we are able to maintain and provide services at all of our sites. Dr. Fearing?
Hi, everyone. Sorry, hopefully you can see my face now. I don't know. Good evening, board members, Chair Ellison, and the public. I apologize I can't be with you tonight due to COVID protocols, but I'm here virtually. So thank you for the question on mental health supports. And I think what's important, I don't know if you could really see my face because I can't see my face, but hopefully you see my face. What I really want to point out here is what do we mean by mental health supports, right? It's one of those terms that have become very cliche as we have been working through a lot of the student need, our families need, community needs, and I think sometimes it's an all-encompassing word for just meeting students' basic needs. Also being able to lead through trauma-informed care, to be able to provide that high-level one-on-one therapy, and sometimes it's just groups or having an open office door and being able to work with students as they come in just with concerns about daily life. And so I think that when we're looking at the budget for the mental health department, which is one of the departments that I oversee, we're really looking kind of at that tier 3, that one-on-one, that therapy that we often utilize our licensed therapist through our contracted services. So that's a department that has traditionally been under our special education department. But for next year, we're still committed of moving them out and having them be their own department as they have expanded quite largely over the last year or so, and to continue to be committed to be able to service every site with that top tier 3. That does not address, the mental health department does not, they do not own school counselors or social workers. They're all in different departments or divisions. And again, those staff are definitely part of our school-wide student support and our mental health services. But when we're talking about the mental health department that was referred to in the Essa funding, I think Director Jardine, you brought that up too. That was really those, when we're looking at our school-based mental health, the clinics, the services they provide, Canvas, Change Inc., Water Course, those different contractors that provide that very intensive one-on-one student or family therapy. So going into next year, we are still committed providing services for at all of our sites. We are going through and working with all of our contractors to make sure that we can fulfill the needs that are arising at all the schools. We know that some of our schools do have wait lists, so we're going back through and looking to how we can rearrange some of the services and our contractors to make sure that we can reduce or eliminate those wait lists. The other thing too that our mental health department is committed to doing that they have not, they started it last summer, but we're continuing to do is year-round support. And so it's not just during the school year, but actually the summer support, so support during summer school. So that's where we had all of our contractors working to support our summer school sites, but then also having staff that are available for families and communities during the summer, because often that's a time when families need more support, but our mental health department last year was down to 1 person. So we wanted to make sure that we had better continuity of services over the summer as well. So we're still going to be doing that coming up this summer. And then the last piece I just wanted to highlight is that we really felt like we need to put in more culturally responsive type of mental health options for our students and families. So we set aside some additional funding to really get into our local neighborhoods, communities, organizations, and places that can provide the mental health support, but in a culturally responsive way. So we'll be working with our engagement department as well as our local community organizations to match and do better with our culturally responsive mental health care. So we have a lot of really good things coming up in our horizon. We just had to do a little moving around and shifting of budget to be able to continue to do it. But because originally we did have it under ESSER, but since that wasn't an option anymore, we just had to move things around to continue it moving forward. But I am very proud of what we're building and the staff that we have so far in that department. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Caprini?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. Thank you, Senior Officer Fearing. I'm sorry, I'm hungry. This is a good example of messaging and communication. I think what you said earlier about just the term itself, and then after explaining, this becoming its own department and all the different layers of support that are going to be offered in our schools. So I think I just wanted to point out that this was for me, it was an opportunity to learn something about my hope that with situations like this, that we become better messengers of the information and communicate it in a way where I don't get so focused and stuck on thinking it's one thing when in actuality it's layers and layers and layers and layers of opportunity. And so the last thing I wanted to say is, as the finance chair, one of the requests I made was that each department speak to the cuts that were coming from their departments. And I really appreciated what went into that work and I wish that we could afford to have those meetings videotaped, because I think that a lot of folks would have been able to get that really deep information about how much they just narrowly needled into each department to really make some cuts so that they weren't those cuts weren't going to fall on the backs of students the way they have in the past. And then there was one last thing Senior Officer Giap brought up, and I can't remember it. It's gone, so I'm going to stop. Thank you.
You can press the button if you think of it again. Yes. Dr. Fearing, can you talk a little bit about predictable staffing in the budget and how it's going to be affected?
I can try. Thanks for the question. I will probably have to pass it to someone else because I actually, the predictable staffing is really worked with through the associates and the principals. But what I can tell you that I think I'm hearing a little bit tonight about the predictable staffing is how it kind of got impacted and maybe in a different way than what people thought. When we look at what a school building needs to not just survive, but to thrive in terms of operations and in terms of your kind of bare minimum staff, it was something that we had put into place to support schools to make sure, they had a secretary, to make sure they had a building leader, to make sure they had a healthcare assistant or a school nurse, bell-to-bell coverage. And these are the basic things that a school must have. And often our small schools had a lot of trouble funding those. And hello, I was at a small school and definitely felt that challenge with a very limited general fund budget. So it did help when we had kind of a checklist of here are all your minimum amount of FTE and staff per student population. And then for schools that were unable to meet that predictable staff, because for like Wellstone, we had a lot of categories, but not a lot of general fund types of fund. Then we were given a small school subsidy or additional dollars. And that's probably a conversation for another time. But I think that's where you start to look at the funding that schools get, and enrollment is really important. And there are, like, if it's a greater than 500 students, you have to have a 0.5, or if it's less than 500 students, you can have less than 0.5, or, examples like that. I think what happened with our, because I think the question was about social workers and counselors, there is a ratio, and it's a recommended ratio, but then in the new contracts or tentative agreements, it also specified for specific schools to have a lower ratio of some of these staff. Because again, I think the intention and the spirit was that these schools, these particular schools, have higher need, and so they would need to have more support staff, licensed support staff to meet the students' needs. So then when that came in, that's an additional cost though for the school, right? Because these positions are FTE and their salary and fringe. And so I think what happens in that gets offset by then the school leader needs to make a choice somewhere else. I'm not quite sure for some of the sites that maybe some of the directors or the audience members, the public that they were commenting on, I'm not privy to those particular school-based conversations, but just from experience, you start with a pie and then you have to start dividing it. You take your predictable staffing, that's automatic, non-negotiable, you got to do it. And then you have to figure out what you're going to do with what's left. And I think when you start having declining enrollment and other pieces that start to pull some of the padding or the funding that you've always had, or maybe you had a grant drop off that you've depended on in years past, it makes for really difficult decisions. I will say, though, that from the academic side, we have done our very best to keep in the supports and the programming. We pay for all the licenses, the software, paying for our K-2 TOSAs that are there. We tried to maintain those despite our budget cuts because we knew that inevitably that would impact the school budget, and then they would have to find money for those additional expenses too. Now, again, to Director Ellen's point, this is a good time to take stock of what's working and what is not working, right? Because again, you don't want to just blindly keep paying for things. But yep, thank you. but what I would say though is that in the autonomy of all of our schools, many schools have certain little niche things that they like and they want to keep, and the district has always funded those, right? But at some point you have to start pulling back, and then that's where you start to get kind of the tension and the difficult conversations, I would say. But yeah, it was a difficult exercise, but we are definitely committed to going back and looking at things. We are not blindly just funding things because we've always funded them before. And we've already had to have some very difficult conversations last week with some of our contractors and outside organizations that we've always funded before, but we just said we can't fund you anymore moving forward.
Thank you. Is there anything else Steph wants to add to that? No.
I would just say that when I first started here, the first week of school, my phone would be ringing quite often because the school would say, well, I don't have enough for a secretary, or I don't have enough for a math teacher. And then that is the impetus for us coming up with the predictable staffing, so that on day one, all schools can operate with the budget that we give them. And over time, we've been adding elements to the predictable staffing and using ratios, and all that is is tied to the budget, to the revenue that we have. And if we had more revenue, then we would have added more on this predictable staffing by either adding new elements to the predictable staffing or by reducing the ratios from, let's say, 1 to 300 to 1 to 150 to make it better. And so predictable staffing, that's why we made it a non-negotiable negotiable thing piece, because we cannot afford to have a school start and not be able to operate because they are short a 0.5 FTE somewhere.
Don't see anybody else in the queue, but I had just one quick question. Well, I don't know how quick it's going to be. I've talked to a couple of schools, and I understand that overall there's a 1% increase in funding going to schools, and that the only cuts they're experiencing are due to enrollment. I've had a couple of schools tell me that they think that their enrollment prediction is pretty drastic, and they don't agree with it. And I'm just wondering if there's any repercussion, any way that they can address those concerns.
Yes, and thank you, Director Ellison, Chair Ellison. We've received those complaints, and we're addressing them as best as we can. When it comes to enrollment prediction, we have a team that is solid, that's been doing it, and every year the difference between what was predicted and the actual number is less than 2% when we're talking about 31,000 students. So my point there is that it is a solid team, and they do a rigorous use a rigorous system to do this. It's just that over the past 2 years, 3 years, we haven't seen anything normal. And so we may be predicting a certain number, and it would come out to be much higher. And if you look, in January, we had to come back and have the board re-vote on the levy, because the amount that we had by October 1, we actually experienced a more severe decline that we found out in November and December, just because of where we are in terms of time with the pandemic. And so that is something that we're looking into. Another piece that would explain the fact that schools received a 1% increase is that the increase in salaries, we're paying that centrally. So that's money that actually is flowing into schools. Every one of my colleagues, the salary increases in our departments, we're finding money to cover that because it's not given to us. But when it comes to schools, we decided to cover the salary increases at all schools.
Thank you. And so what I heard you say is that this will be another discussion at our Finance Committee meeting on May 17th.
Yes.
So just next week. And then the final proposal would be brought to the board at our next business meeting in June.
Yes.
On June 14th. So thank you very much for this presentation. Thank you, directors, for your questions. But this is not the last time we're going to be discussing the finance. So thank you, Senior Officer Diop.
Thank you.
Next is the Policy Committee report. Policy Committee Chair Inns, if you'd like to please go ahead with your committee's report.
Thank you, Chair Ellison. So the Policy Committee had its first meeting of 2022 after some delay, and we took up 3 policy matters to refer to the board for tonight for our first reading. The first was a revision, and Ryan Strack is here if there are any questions about some of these as well. The first is a revision of policy 6510 on work-based learning, and the point of that was to make just a few technical changes to make sure we're in legal compliance. Second policy was a revision of policy 6000 to align the mission, vision, and commitment statements to those that we recently approved in our strategic plan. And then the third item updated the policy 3546 on bus equipment and drivers to make sure that we include type 3 drivers and vehicles. All 3 revisions were recommended by the committee. And so that concludes the Policy Committee report, Chair Ellison.
Thank you very much. Directors, do you have any questions on the Policy Committee report? Hit the request to speak button. None. Okay, thank you. Next, we're going to vote on a few items. It's a number of items. And as a reminder, because we have a director participating via electronic means, all votes will be taken by roll call. First is approval of the consent agenda. The consent agenda includes routine items that do not involve major policy, budget, or taxing decisions, bond awards, or items related to the superintendent's contract or evaluation. Director Caprini, will you please move approval of this item? So moved. On the consent agenda?
Second.
Thank you. So that's okay. Consent agenda has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Director Caprini?
Yes, I would like to take the American Reading Company.
Oh, we did.
We did that.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right. So moved.
Okay, we've been moved and seconded.
Yeah.
Seeing no discussion, Inns, can you please call the roll on the consent?
Aye.
Elamine.
Yes.
Ali. Surreal.
Aye.
Inns is aye. Jordan.
Yes.
Caprini.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye, thank you. That motion carries and the consent agenda is approved. Next is approve the contract with American Reading Company, which was pulled from the consent agenda for individual consideration. Can I get a motion to approve this item?
So moved.
May I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. A contract for American Reading Company has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Director Caprini.
Oops. So I have been visiting a few schools that have implemented the Groves Academy, and I was really impressed at Northrop as well as Nellie Stone and Burroughs, 3 similar but different schools. And I just wanted to point out that what was exciting to me was how excited the children were about what they were learning. In each of the schools, there were a couple of students that kind of like moved about, and the teachers were able to redirect them to get them to stay on task. Here's the thing, they were still on task even though they had gotten up and moved around. So I'm not sure if any of you have well, maybe a lot of you have been to a Groves Academy class, but nevertheless, it was something that I've appreciated, and I have other schools that have implemented that I'm also going to be taking a visit in. So I just had a couple of questions about the goals of the summer program and how this particular contract will support those goals. And would you consider this to be leveled readers or, and yes, so I'll stop there and let you answer the question. Dr. Fearing, where'd you go?
Dr. Fearing.
I'm here. Actually, I think Darren Johnson is in the audience, and he is he's the director of our extended learning that also runs our summer school programming. So I was hoping that he could give a little context behind ARC and the fact that the use of their materials in our summer programming. And I do want to, as he's maybe coming up for getting the microphone, I do want to say that this past summer, we did do a pilot summer programming with Groves at Loring. It was very time intensive for the teachers, PD wise. We were very much willing to do that again this summer and have another site or continue with Loring. It's just staffing capacity and being able to find teachers that are willing to do it. But it is something definitely we are very much open to. We also have to double check the capacity of Groves because they would have to hire coaches in the summer. And it's a little bit different than the contracted coaches that they use during the school year. But we are definitely open to that as well. So if Darren is available to speak to ARC, that would be great. Is he there?
Yes, she's there.
Dr. Fearing, I wanted to just talk a little bit about the Groves Literacy Partnership. Director Caprini, I know you had visited some sites and you probably have more sites to go visit. I just wanted to clarify, with the partnership with Groves Literacy Partnership, their summer program is not the same as what students and what teachers are experiencing during the school year. So for the summer, for the Groves Summer Literacy Program, it is really targeted at Tier 2, Tier 3 interventions, and they are and the curriculum that they use during the summer program is directly aligned to what students would be getting during the school year, during their core. And the model for it is a little bit different, where we want to try to, as with any interventions, we want to target students and target the skills that they need for the interventions. And so we try to keep the class sizes in those classes to be 8 to 10 students. And so it's very different than a classroom that you would see where there was core instruction happening. And so I did want to just share that even though it's aligned to the curriculum that they use during the school year, but the Groves summer program, their curriculum does look different, and it's really targeted with interventions in mind.
Thank you. Thank you. One of the things that I also wanted to recognize is that the summer school teachers are not always the same teachers that are teaching the classes during the school year. I wanted to be mindful of that. So I just wanted those few questions answered about, wait, did we answer what are the goals? I don't think we got that part. What are the goals of the summer program? Like, do we have, what are the goals of the summer program?
And I'll hand it over to Director Johnson.
Director Caprini, the rest of the directors and student representative, good evening. I'm Darren, and talking about the goals for summer reading, we really look at it, changing the look at summer school and members at home too. It's not remediation. Our big goal is acceleration. When looking at the reading curriculum adoption, we looked at many different options that we had. The process that we have here in Minneapolis Public Schools, it protects our students to make sure that we select the right materials for them, looking at a variety of curriculum options and going through the process, making sure that it met what our goals were, looking at utilizing the IDEA, and going through the RFP process. It really was clear that the ARC curriculum that was selected was the right core summer school reading curriculum for us. And like what Dr. Furing did mention, we could look at utilizing the groves as a more of an intervention if that was deemed necessary too.
I appreciate that because I really was very impressed with what I saw at Northrop and Nellystone and Burroughs, and I just look forward to checking out a few more sites, and I'm extremely happy about the fact that we will be implementing the Groves Academy in the K through second grade schools across the district. So thank you. I'm good to go.
Thank you, Director Caprini. Seeing no further discussion, will the clerk please call the roll on the motion to approve the contract for American Reading Company?
Arneson.
Aye.
Elmi. Ali.
Yes.
Surreal.
Aye.
Indes, yes. Jordan.
Yes.
Caprini.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye, thank you. That motion carries and the contract is approved. Our next several items are approval of collective bargaining agreements with employee union groups. I want to thank and acknowledge our human resources team and all those members of both the district and the union bargaining teams for their work to reach these agreements. First up is approval of the 2020-2023 collective bargaining agreement between Special School District Number 1 and the Service Employees International Union Local 284 Food Service. Can I please get a motion to approve this agreement?
So moved.
Thank you. Approval of the collective bargaining agreement between MPS and SEIU Local 284 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll on this item?
Arneson.
Aye.
Elamine.
Yes.
Ali.
Yes.
Surreal.
Aye.
Indes, aye. Jordan.
Yes.
Caprini.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye, thank you. That motion carries and the contract is approved. Next is approval of the 2021-2023 collective bargaining agreement between Special School District Number 1 and the Minneapolis Federation of Teachers Local 59 Educational Support Professionals. Can I please get a motion to approve this agreement?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Approval of collective bargaining agreement between MPS and MFT ESP chapter has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll on this motion?
Arneson.
Aye.
Elamine.
Yes.
Ali.
Yes.
Surreal.
Aye.
Indes, yes. Jordan.
Yes.
Caprini.
Aye.
Ellison.
Yes, thank you. That motion carries and the agreement is approved. Next is approval of the 2021-2023 collective bargaining agreement between Special School District Number 1 and the Minneapolis Federation of Teachers Local 59 Teacher Chapter. Can I please get a motion to approve this agreement?
Second.
Thank you. Approval of the collective bargaining agreement between MPS and MFT Teacher Chapter has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, clerk, will you please call the roll on this item?
Arneson.
Aye.
Elamine.
Yes.
Ali.
Yes.
Surreal.
Aye.
Indes, yes. Jordan.
Yes.
Caprini.
Aye.
Ellison.
Yes, thank you. That motion carries and the agreement is approved. Next is approval of the 2021-2023 collective bargaining agreement between the Special School District Number 1 and Minneapolis Federation of Teachers Local 59 Adult Education Chapter. Can I please get a motion to approve this agreement?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Approval of the collective bargaining agreement between MPS and MFT Adult Education Chapter has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, clerk, will you please call the roll on this item?
Arneson.
Aye.
Elamine. Ali.
Yes.
Surreal. Indes, yes. Jordan. Caprini.
Aye.
Ellison.
Yes, thank you. That motion passes and the agreement is approved. Next is approval of the 2021-2023 collective bargaining agreement between the Special School District Number 1 and the Minneapolis Principals Forum. Can I get a motion to approve this agreement?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Approval of the collective bargaining agreement between MPS and the Principal Forum has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, clerk, will you please call the roll on this item?
Arneson.
Aye.
Elamine. Ali.
Yes.
Surreal. Indes, yes. Jordan. Caprini.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye, thank you. The motion carries and the agreement is approved. Next is approval of the 2021-2023 collective bargaining agreement between Special School District Number 1 and the Minnesota Teamsters Public Law Enforcement Employees, Local 320 grounds. Can I please get a motion to approve this agreement?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. Approval of the collective bargaining agreement between MPS and Teamsters grounds has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, clerk, will you please call the roll on this item?
Arneson.
Aye.
Elamine. Yes. Ali.
Yes.
Cerrillo. Aye. Inns is yes. Jordan. Yes. Caprini.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye. Thank you. That motion carries and the agreement is approved. Our next item and the final employee group item is approval of the 2022-2024 compensation and employment term plan with our non-represented employees. Can I get a motion to approve this item?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Approval of the compensation and employment terms plan with non-represented employees has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, clerk, will you please call the roll on this item?
Arneson.
Aye.
Elamine. Yes. Ali.
Yes.
Cerrillo. Aye. Inns is yes. Jordan. Yes. Caprini.
Aye.
Ellison. Yes, thank you. That motion carries and the item is approved. And thanks again to all our negotiating teams. Our next item is resolution labeled 2022-30, which designates 3 MPS facilities as surplus properties pursuant to our policy and regulation in the disposition of MPS real property. As we heard about and discussed at last month's Committee of the Whole, this action here tonight, if adopted, would mean that the district would be entertaining purchase or lease offers on these properties. Information about the next steps and about these specific properties will be available on the Operations Real Estate website soon. Can I please get a motion to approve this item?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Approval of resolution designating Willard, Gordon, and Tuttle buildings as surplus real properties has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, clerk, will you please call the roll on this item?
Arneson.
Aye.
Elamine.
Yes.
Ali.
Yes.
Cerrillo. Yes. Inns is yes. Jordan.
Yes.
Caprini.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye, thank you. That motion carries and the resolution is approved. The next item is a transfer of capital funds referred from and recommended by the Finance Committee, labeled as Resolution 2022-18. Can I please get a motion to approve this item?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Approval of Resolution 2022-18 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, clerk, will you please call the roll on this item?
Oh, sorry. Director Arneson.
Aye.
Elamine. Yes. Ali.
Yes.
Cerrillo. Yes. Inns is yes. Jordan.
Yes.
Caprini.
Aye.
Ellison. Yes, thank you. That motion carries and the resolution is approved. Our next item is the appointment to fill the remaining term of the vacant at-large school board seat. The selected member will join the board once their oath of office has been signed and will serve until January 2nd, 2023. As previously shared, we will use the same process to make the selection as we use to elect board officers. For those watching, this means I will first ask for directors to make nominations from among the applicants, and then we will vote from those nominated. If nobody receives a majority of votes cast on the first vote, we will eliminate all but the top 2 vote getters and then vote between those 2. Because we have an even number of directors here to vote, as chair, I will be abstaining from voting to ensure we do not have a tie. With that, I will now open the floor for nominations. Director Inns?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to nominate Cynthia Booker. Cynthia Booker's application, she answered the question about her experience and skills bringing to the school board, included launching a college prep and workforce development consulting firm for students between 12 and 21, working within the community as an executive director, being a corporate finance executive, college administrator, and high school outreach counselor at North and Washburn High Schools. As a BIPOC graduate of Minneapolis Public Schools and a senior executive in various industries, she would add significant value understanding between the board and other stakeholders, economics degree, corporate finance experience of 14 years to assist the district with budget processes. Also, her practical approaches based on her experience as being a low-income and first-generation college student. And Cynthia has been a community activist in South Minneapolis for a long time and is well-known in the community and has many great relationships that she would bring to the board. So I'd like to nominate Cynthia Booker.
And thank you, Director Inns. Director Ali?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would like to nominate Lynn Crockett. Mrs. Crockett, I have known her for the past 8 years, and she has been a genuine advocate for the children of Minneapolis public schools, particularly students of and families of North Minneapolis. And Lynn Crockett, Ms. Crockett, has the knowledge and the experience and the passion to be an advocate and represent students, staff, and communities at Minneapolis public schools. So I do nominate Mrs. Crockett. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Ali. Director Elamine?
I guess I would just second what Ali said. I was nominating Lynn Crockett as well. Again, having the opportunity to work with her. Lynn has been in our community for over 50 years, bringing knowledge of experience, relationship. She's worked in the district as well, so she's just a wealth of knowledge that would be in addition to our board as we try to work through the difficult time that's going to take place during these next few months. So Lynn Crockett would be another that I nominate too as well.
Thank you. Director Soria.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I want to thank all the applicants, and I wish I could give my nomination to more than just one individual. I'm really excited that our community is really more engaged and in tune with education, and I really hope that the applicants that will not be serving with us for the rest of the year will continue to not only being engaged, but also taking leadership in running for office. My nomination is for Ms. Lynn Crockett as well. And I second everything that Director Elamine and Director Ali mentioned as well. My respect and honor to an elder that has been very active in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. I too want to extend my thanks to everybody who applied. It's really important and really fulfilling to serve your community in public service this way. And while we can only select one person here tonight, I hope everyone stays engaged and looks at other ways that they can serve the public. Okay. We have Cynthia Booker that's been nominated, and Lynn Crockett has been nominated. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, I will now close the nominations. Clerk Enns, will you please call through the roll, asking each person to verbally cast their vote for one of these two nominated.
Okay. Director Arneson.
Difficult, but Booker.
Elamine.
Crockett.
Ali.
Ms. Crockett.
Cerrillo.
Lynn Crockett.
Inns is Booker. Jourdain.
Booker.
Caprini.
Booker.
Okay, and Ellison abstention.
Abstain. Yep, I abstain. Thank you. Okay, so what do we have?
We have 4 for Cynthia Booker, 3 for Lynn Crockett.
Okay, well, having received a majority of the votes cast, it's my honor to announce that Cynthia Booker has been appointed to fill the vacant school board seat. Congratulations and welcome, Director Booker. She will be at our next board meeting or as soon as she signs her oath of office. The next item is appointment of Rochelle Cox, interim superintendent to the 2022-2023 school year, and approval of an interim superintendent employment contract with Ms. Cox. both effective July 1st, 2022. It's my pleasure to move approval of this item. Can I please get a second? Second. Thank you. Appointment of Rochelle Cox as the 2022-2023 interim superintendent's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Director Arneson?
Thanks. I just wanted to say thank you, first of all, for your willingness to serve. I know you're driven by a deep commitment to MPS, but I know that it's also not easy to step into a role like this. I appreciate your willingness to serve. I think transition in the education world is always difficult because childhood is fleeting, education is essential, and we don't want to waste a moment. And yet, it's really important that we spend the time necessary to reflect on where we've been and get on the same page about where we want to go. So the average urban superintendent's tenure is about 3 years, and we are more likely to beat those odds if we're able to set up a successful interim period. So I appreciate Associate Superintendent Cox because she's a deep and respected service in our district. We've had multiple years of academic disruption, and we need a year of steadiness and focus. And her experience with trauma-informed care is appropriate. We can all name recent traumatic events, unfortunately too many of them, and we want a leader with that. We want to lead with that perspective over the next year. So I know she's going to offer competent and compassionate leadership, so this board and the next board, the one that joins us in January, can lead our community in an in-depth superintendent search process. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we vote, I want to also offer a few comments. Let me start by thanking everyone who shared your input and perspectives for an interim superintendent. I'm sorry. Director Ali. Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to thank Ms. Rochelle Cox for her leadership and long-term commitment to Minneapolis Public Schools and the children of Minneapolis Public Schools. And I fully support her, and I look forward working with you, Mrs. Cox, as our next interim superintendent. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Ali. So like I said, time did not permit an extensive search for interim superintendent, but that will occur when we have a permanent superintendent search process. Myself and members of the board did hear from many in the community about the attributes you believed were most needed in this transitional leader. For an interim superintendent, we needed a trusted and proven leader who can provide stability and keep the focus on student learning while we work with community to find a permanent superintendent. In addition to meeting that description, Ms. Cox has served the students and families of Minneapolis Public Schools for 25 years, knows the ins and outs of our complicated system, and can seamlessly move into the position upon Superintendent Graff's departure. Associate Superintendent Cox has been with MPS since 1997, when she joined the Early Childhood Special Education Department. She has since served in several leadership positions, including recently as Executive Director of Special Education and Health Services. She's led the development of the first Minnesota School District Special Education Licensing Program, redesigned placement of every citywide special education program and each student's placement, and created a tiered model of mental health supports within the district. In addition, in her current role of Associate Superintendent, she oversees the district's COVID-19 response and management and supervises 21 elementary schools. We knew that we needed a strong temporary leader on board by June 30th, and with that now accomplished, the board can focus our attention on developing a robust engagement and search plan for identifying a permanent leader over the next school year. Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, I renew my motion to appoint Rochelle Cox as the 2022-2023 interim superintendent. Will the clerk please call the roll on this item?
Arneson.
Aye.
Elamine.
Yes.
Ali.
Yes.
Cirillo. Yes. Inns is yes. Jordan. Yes. Caprini.
Aye.
Ellison.
Yes, thank you. That motion carries and the item is approved. With Ms. Cox, with the board's sincerest gratitude for your willingness to serve our community in this way, congratulations on our next interim superintendent. Thank you. Before we get to our final report, I wanted to mention, I skipped somebody. We have amazing teachers, and I skipped somebody who's been recognized, one of our teachers. The Washburn High School teacher, Dr. Angela Ogilvy, has been named the recipient of the 2022 Minnesota High School Chemistry Teaching Award. The award is given each year to an outstanding high school chemistry teacher. Congratulations, Dr. Ogilvy. I would also like to thank all the applicants for the vacant board seat and encourage each and every one of you to consider running for school board either this year or in the future. Our school board elections, as a reminder, the filing period for the 2022 election opens on May 17th and runs through May 31st. All MPS elections are run by the City of Minneapolis Elections Office, so more information can be found at their website, vote.minneapolismn.gov. Thank you. Directors, if you have any reports from your committees or anything else that you're working on about education. Director Inns?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Policy Committee is going to be meeting next on May 24th at 4:30 p.m. right here. In addition to continuing our regular policy review work, we're also going to hear a presentation about the findings from the Equity and Diversity Impact Assessment conducted on school site councils. So that should be very interesting. Encourage everyone to pay attention to that.
Thank you, Director Enns. Director Caprini.
Thank you, Chair Enns. I just wanted to recognize that this is, did I say Enns?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm so hungry. Chair Ellison, I just wanted to recognize that this is National Mental Health Awareness Month, so I appreciated the conversation that occurred during our meeting. And then I already talked about the visits to the schools that are using the Groves Academy, so won't bring that up again. But I would like to say congratulations to all of the Athena Award winners. It was an amazing award ceremony last week. And I just was so proud of all of the MPS high school students that received that award. And it was the 50th anniversary, so it was a pretty cool thing to be in the presence of so much talent. And these are student athletes. You know, they work hard, a lot of amazing grade point averages, and then their future, you know, the schools that they're going to be attending, it's pretty exciting. So you've done good. We've got some great student athlete women in Minneapolis Public Schools, and I'm excited to see what they do in the future. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Caprini, any other comments? Director Soria.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to mention briefly, we have our first event at Ella Baker on the 26th of this month, and we are putting together this event to celebrate the name change. And I'm really excited to also say that we are having our PTO meetings, and we have the involvement of students. And I'm just really excited of the work that is being done, and yeah, everyone is invited. So once we have the flyer together, I'll be sharing that with everyone. So I hope to see everyone there. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Director Elamine?
Just wanted to briefly bring up the hall and the basketball, everything that was done yesterday that was donated from the Women WNCAA. It was just really great to see the excitement on the children's faces, and just seeing something being added to our community to give our children an opportunity to experience something that they may not have a chance to experience. So just having that excitement. And then again, the YCB is tomorrow. We'll meet, so we don't have an update tonight, but we will meet tomorrow in regards to that too as well. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Student Representative Rance?
Yes, me and Jake would just like to give an update as to an event we attended along with Director Enns, Chair Ellison, and Director Surreal regarding the Hennepin History Museum, where we attended a community the then and now a community conversation on public schools. And they also debuted their new exhibit called Separate Not Equal, the Hale Field Pairing, which talks about Hale and Field in the 1970s when MPS schools began to desegregate. And they had a mix of current board members, student representatives, students who were part of the Hale Field pairing in the 70s. And we talked about desegregation MPS schools, how far has MPS come in regarding equity and diversity, and what shortcomings can people see within MPS schools, and how they like to envision MPS schools and public schools in general 20 years from now. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing nobody else in the queue, that concludes our agenda. Without objection, I will now adjourn this meeting. Our next meeting will be the Committee of the Whole on May 24th, 6 p.m. Good night, everybody.